I had just turned 30 when I decided to leave New York and start over in a quiet town nestled in the Rockies. Ashwood. The town was barely on the map, and that was exactly why I chose it. City life was too loud, too fast, too cruel. My divorce was fresh, and my job in finance had nearly destroyed my spirit. So I sold everything, crammed my life into a rented van, and drove until the air smelled of pine and the silence was deafening. Ashwood greeted me with dense woods, winding roads, and a quietness that was almost artificial. I found an old cabin for rent on the edge of town, the only one still listed on a dusty gas station bulletin board. The landlord, Mr. Douglas, was a lean man in his 60s, with piercing blue eyes that seemed never to blink. He gave me the key and said only one sentence: "If you see her, don't follow her." I snickered, thinking it was some local ghost story, but he didn't laugh along. The cabin stood alone on a dirt road, surrounded by tall, skeleton-like trees. It was old. The floors creaked. The fireplace groaned when it was lit. The smell of cedar and dust wafted up with every step. But it was my place, for a while at least. The first few days, I could only breathe a sigh of relief. I woke up with the sunlight streaming to the curtains, made coffee, and sat on the porch watching the fog slowly dissipate on the hillside. It was a peace I had never experienced before. But then, that peace did not last long. It starts on Thursday night. I was reading in bed when I heard footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps on dry leaves outside. I froze. The nearest neighbor was at least half a mile away. I turned off the night light, went to the window, and peeked through the old glass. A woman stood at the edge of the forest. She was barefoot, wearing a white nightgown that clung to her body as if it were wet. Her hair was long and black, covering most of her face. She didn't look at me, just stood there, facing the house, completely motionless. My first thought was, someone needs help, but something was very wrong. I opened the door a crack and called out, "Are you okay?" She didn't move. I stepped out onto the porch, my feet cold from the ground. "Do you need help?" Still silent. Then she took a step back into the woods and disappeared behind the trees. That night, I could not sleep. The next day, I went to the town police station. The chief was named Malcolm, an old man with a crooked nose and a permanent look of weariness. When I told him what I saw, he didn't take notes. He just nodded slowly. "You're not the first." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "They call her the Weeping Woman. She's been around for decades. No one knows who she is, but whenever she shows up, strange things start happening. People disappearing, animals panicking, lights going off. It's no laughing matter." I asked why no one did anything. He simply replied, "Because whoever dares to interfere will either disappear or go crazy." That night, I set up a camera on my porch. I needed proof, at least to reassure myself. Another sleepless night, and at exactly 2:13 a.m., she returned. This time, she stood closer. The next morning, I turned on the footage, my heart pounding. She emerged from behind a tree, walked toward the cabin, stopped about 10 feet from the camera, and tilted her head. Then she smiled. The smile was wrong, too wide, like the skin had been stretched too tight. The teeth were inhuman. Then she whispered something. The mic picked it up very faintly. Sounds like, "You shouldn't be here." The screen flickered, then went black. I left the camera on the porch. The next morning, it was gone. I called Mr. Douglas. No one answered. I drove into town. His house was empty. The people in the area avoided my eyes. Something is very wrong at Ashwood. I no longer felt safe in the cabin. After the cameras disappeared, I tried calling Sheriff Malcolm again. No answer. I went to the police station. The door was closed and locked. A handwritten sign hung outside, closed for personal reasons. The whole town of Ashwood seemed frozen. People avoided me, as if I carried something unclean. When I entered the small cafe in town, the conversations immediately died down. An elderly woman whispered as I passed, "It marked you." I left, head buzzing, heart pounding. That night, I locked all the doors. I piled chairs and cabinets in front of the windows and drew the curtains thickly. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. At about 1 a.m., I heard the first sound, a song. It began with a very soft humming note, like a lullaby from afar. That melody wouldn't be scary if it weren't in the middle of the night, in the middle of a deserted forest. I opened the curtains. Thick fog hung around the cabin, and from within the mist, her figure appeared again. She moved closer, still humming the song. Her voice cut through the air, echoing to the forest as if from many directions at once. Each line was eerie, and I recognized it. The words were in Old French. I don't understand everything, but a rough translation is, "My love, come with me, where pain sleeps forever." I closed the blinds, turned on the lights, and locked the door. But the singing still lingered around the house, even though she was out of sight. I took the tape recorder and placed it by the window. The next morning, when I opened the file, I was stunned. Besides the singing, I also heard a knock on the door. Not once, 9 times. 3 hours on pause, and then 3 more, a cycle that repeats like a signal. I checked the front door. Nothing, but the door had 3 deep fingernail scratches. I decided to leave the cabin for a few days. I packed my bags and booked a hotel in another town. But when I got to the car, I was shocked. All 4 tires were slashed. There was no escape. I called the towing company. No one answered. Just then, I heard footsteps behind me. Turn back. No one. But on the windshield of the car, in something like dark resin, someone had written, "Don't go away." That night, I didn't dare sleep. I sat in front of the fireplace, holding the baseball bat I found in the old barn. At nearly 3 a.m., a dark shadow passed by the left window. I rushed out, flashlight in hand. No one is there, but I heard a whisper from behind me. "You are doing it wrong." I turned around, only empty space. The wind whistled through the cracks in the wooden walls, but the whisper still echoed, as if coming from inside my head. I tracked down Mr. Douglas, who had rented me the cabin. After several unanswered calls, I went straight to his house. The door was ajar. It was dark inside. I called out, "Mr. Douglas, I am the tenant of the cabin." No answer. I walked in. On the dining table, there was an old, half-burned photo. I picked it up and tried to look closely. The photo is of the cabin I'm staying in. On the porch, a middle-aged man is standing with her, same woman, white nightgown, black hair covering her face. I turned the photo over, scribbled in ink, "If she follows you, don't look her in the eye." I turned to leave and saw Mr. Douglas standing in the dark hallway. He muttered, "You looked her in the eye, didn't you?" I don't know what to say. He gradually backed away, crying and saying, "No one survived seeing her a 3rd time." That night, I took the photo home and looked at it again. Then I had a crazy idea. Rewind to the old videos I had taken earlier when she came to porch. I paused at the clearest frame. Used software to enhance the brightness. Zoomed in, beneath the loose hair that covered most of her face. Her eyes were wide open and unblinking. The pupils were not round, but vertical like those of a snake. The pupils were dilated, as black as the abyss. I stared at the screen. And just then, the power in the house went out. I screamed and threw the computer to the ground. Everything went dark. Then the singing started again. But this time it wasn't from the woods. It was from right on the 2nd floor of the cabin. I can't move. The singing was coming down from upstairs, from the attic I never dared to go up to. Each haunting lullaby echoed through the walls, sweeping through the hallway like a chill wind. It was no longer a lullaby. It was a call, an invitation that slowly pulled me upstairs. I shook as I held the flashlight, my hand still clutching the baseball bat. I walked up the stairs step by step, feeling the wooden steps creak under my feet. When reaching the last step, the singing stopped. Instead, there was breathing, a heavy breathing, as if someone was standing very close, but not visible to the naked eye. I swung the flashlight around the attic. The place was dusty. Cobwebs covered the wooden beams. A large wooden chest lay in the corner. The breathing stopped when the flashlight shone on it. I stepped forward, my hand shaking as I opened the lid of the box. Inside was a white nightgown yellow with age. There were dark blood stains on the fabric, and a diary. The leather cover was moldy. I took the book downstairs and barred the attic door with whatever I could get my hands on. Sitting under the desk lamp, I opened the first page. The scribbled words. My name is Eleanor Ward, and I have been imprisoned in my own home. The following pages tell of a woman who lived in this cabin in the 1930s. She was confined by her husband after developing a mental illness. Eleanor wrote that she heard whispers in the woods and saw people looking out her windows at night, but her husband did not believe her. I looked into their eyes, and I was no longer myself. There's a page torn off. Then the diary suddenly changed tone. He had no control over me. They called me out of this body. They set me free. The last lines were just a jumble of characters, as if written in blood. I threw the diary away, my heart pounding like a drum. I decided I had to leave this place at all costs. I walked to the neighboring house, but found it had long been abandoned. The windows were broken. Inside, there was only a rusted iron bed frame and dusty handprints on the walls. I continued on into town to the public library. Luckily, it was still open. I asked about Eleanor Ward. The old librarian looked at me as if I had just spoken the name of the devil. She disappeared. Her husband reported that she hanged herself in the attic, but no one found her body. The villagers said that she still roamed the woods at night. I asked, "What about her husband?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. He was burned alive in that very house. His body was found charred in a wooden box. It was as if someone had locked him up and set him on fire. I returned to the cabin at dusk, intending to pack up what was left and run away by any means necessary. But when I walked in, the lights in the house turned on automatically. I don't turn them on. And on the dining table, Eleanor's diary was open at a page I had never read. A new line written in red ink. "You are replacing my husband." I stepped back, but a cold gust of air swept across the back of my neck, making me pause. The window behind me slammed shut. I ran up to the bedroom, hid in the closet, and tried to keep quiet. From the hallway, slow footsteps echoed. Then the singing started again. No longer soft, but it was a growl, distorted, like from a throat that was no longer intact. I held my breath. Through the gap in the closet door, I saw a white shirt drift by. No footsteps, as if gliding on air. I don't remember when I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was morning. The door was open, but I had new scratches on my arm. 3 long, deep ones. On the bedroom mirror, there's a line written in steam. "I won't let you go. I can't deny it anymore. Eleanor isn't dead. She never left the cabin. And now, I won't be leaving here either." I started to lose sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard wheezing near my ear. Every time I woke up, the sheets were messed up, objects moved. One night, I saw fingerprints on the bathroom mirror, as if someone on the other side of the glass was trying to touch me. I don't dare look in the mirror at night anymore, because sometimes I see myself not myself. I tried leaving the cabin again by motorbike. About 10 miles out of town, the tires suddenly exploded as if cut by a knife. I fell flat on my face by the side of the road. As I scrambled to my feet, I heard another car in the distance. An old truck stop. The driver, an old man, stared at me as if he had recognized me all along. "You're the new tenant in cabin number 6? I nodded. "Get out of there while you can," he said. "The devil in that house, he doesn't forget." I asked, "What do you know about Eleanor?" The old man's eyes darkened. "Eleanor has not been human for a long time. I went back to the cabin with him. But when we got there, everything was different. The house looked much older than it had just a few hours ago. Weeds were growing wild. The wooden doors were rotten. The floorboards were peeling. This is cabin number 6? I asked. "Yes," he said. "It has always been like this since the fire in 1941. I was startled. "No, it's not on fire. I've been living there for the past few days." The old man looked at me sympathetically, then shook his head. "What you live in is not a home. It is a cursed memory." We walked in. The interior was a complete mess. The smell of mold, smoke, and ash still lingered. No more TV, no more mattress I used to sleep on. Only ashes remain. And handprints on the ceiling. Scorched handprints. "I was you," he said softly. "I lived here in 1965. And I saw Eleanor, too. I turned back. Did you survive?" "No," he smiled sadly. "I left my soul here." Just then, the wind howled. From the attic, the singing echoed again. This time, it was no longer soft or hallucinatory. It was a broken scream, like the howling of 1,000 throats twisted into one. The old man and I ran to the door, but it slammed shut. The whole cabin shook. The lights went out. From the cracks in the floor, a thick black liquid began to seep out. It wasn't water, but something like oil mixed with blood. On the wall, blood-red words gradually appeared. "I'm still here." I crawled back up the stairs, hoping to find a way out through the attic. The attic door was wide open, and there standing was her, no longer the woman in the white shirt. Eleanor was now a charred figure, her hair burned off, her skin blotchy, but her eyes still intact. Blood-red eyes, watery, hateful, and empty. She walked towards me, each step like tearing the wind. I shouted, "What do you want?" She paused. Then she spoke in a voice that was no longer human. "I want you to stay." I don't remember what happened after that. I only woke up in the hospital a few days later. The police said I was found unconscious in the woods. Cabin? No such thing. Just an old, rotting stone foundation where a house used to be decades ago. They found no old man. There is no neighbor by that name. I left town, but every night I still heard the singing, not from far away. Just behind me, I am being watched. Eleanor still walked beside me. I can't go on with my normal life anymore. Even after I left that town, the feeling of being watched continued to haunt me. It was like a ghost, not Eleanor's anymore, but my own. The feeling that I was living in a world that wasn't mine. A world where I was no longer myself. Every night, when I lie down, the street light from outside the window still makes me feel like someone is standing out there, silently watching me. Then one night, I got a call. It was from an unknown number. I picked up, gasping, no other words. "Can you hear me?" That voice, like a whisper through the dark night. I didn't answer. I threw the phone away, hitting the wall. The next morning, I noticed something strange. While I was sleeping, I had my phone in my hand. And in my call history, there was a call to me. I think I'm crazy. I tried to go back there, looking for any answers. Back in the woods, I saw the broken stone floor again, no trace of the cabin, but I knew where it was, though there was nothing left but a vacant lot. I stood there, haunted, staring into empty space. Suddenly, I heard whispering behind me, but no one was there. "You won't get away." The voice echoed again. This time, I turned around and saw myself. It was me, but not me. A reflection in the air, a person with empty, soulless eyes. That face wasn't mine. It was like a shell, an empty shell. I ran out of there in a panic, my palms cold. I returned home, closed the door tightly, but kept feeling something strange. The wind gently brushed my face, not from outside the window, but from inside my room. I broke out in a cold sweat and stood up to look around. Suddenly, the mirror on the wall shook as if someone was trying to break it. And then I saw it. It was none other than Eleanor, standing right behind me in the mirror. She said nothing, but her red eyes stared straight at me, full of anger, full of pain. I turned back, but there was no one there. The next day, I received a package with no sender's name. Inside the box was an old, pale yellow photograph. It was of me, but in the photo, I was standing in the cabin. The scene was before I first arrived, but in the photo, there was a woman standing next to me. The woman was wearing that white dress, her long hair falling over her face. Eleanor, and below the photo, there's a line of text. "We can't escape. What is the price to pay?" I can't escape these memories, can't escape these haunting ghosts. Every night, I see Eleanor, see myself, as if I had been replaced, a shadow of myself. The sighs still echo every night. Every time I pass by the mirror, they are just waiting for me, so that I can offer myself to those souls. The price I paid was my soul, and I would never escape Eleanor. I no longer knew what was real and what was imaginary. I no longer felt like I lived in this world. Eleanor had taken me, taken the real me, and I am not myself anymore. Things started to spiral out of control. I couldn't tell dream from reality anymore. Every day that passed, I felt like I was being swallowed by something invisible but palpable. I woke up one morning with a heavy feeling, as if something was pressing down on my chest. My hands were shaking as I looked around the room. There was nothing special, just a familiar room with the paintings on the wall, the big mirror and the empty bed. But something strange happened. As I passed the mirror, I saw Eleanor right there, standing beside me, as if she had been there all along. Her red eyes were staring at me with indescribable hatred. I gasped, trying to turn around to look into the room, but saw nothing. There was only my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were empty and lifeless, as if I'd lost all emotion. Those eyes were not mine. They were empty, dark, as if replaced by another being. A few days later, I couldn't sleep well anymore. Every time I did, I had constant nightmares where Eleanor was always there, watching me, screeching in pain. The dreams began to change. Eleanor and I were in a room, but it wasn't my room. It was a cold, dark room with only a small, dusty bed and an old, open wardrobe. She said nothing, but I could feel the fear in her eyes. It was as if her eyes were warning me of something, a truth I could not escape. I couldn't escape that room, couldn't escape Eleanor's red eyes. One day, I found a notebook in the small room where I used to hide from my nightmares. The notebook was old, the leather cover was frayed, and the pages were yellowed. I opened it and saw scribbles, written in indelible black ink. "She will never forgive you. She will follow you until you are completely consumed." Every word screamed in my head, like a warning from someone who had been in this situation. I decided to go back to the town where it all began. It was the only place that could explain everything that was happening to me. The town had not changed. It was still dark, silent, and scary. The old houses still stood like tombs for dead memories. I returned to the small cabin where I had first met Eleanor. Everything was the same. The walls were rotten. The ground had caved in, but the traces of the past were still evident. I stood there looking into the cabin. It felt like someone was watching me. Suddenly, I felt something cold brush against my neck. My legs froze, unable to move. It felt like someone was standing right behind me. I turned back, but saw no one. I heard a sigh in the air. "She's so close." A voice whispered in my head. I didn't dare go back to the cabin. I turned and walked away, just hoping it would be over. But no, Eleanor wouldn't leave me alone. She still follows me, like a shadow that cannot be shaken off. Ever since I returned to town and entered the cabin, things have only gotten worse. With each passing day, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Eleanor was no longer a ghost that only appeared in my dreams. She had now become a part of my life. Sometimes, I think I'm going crazy. I can feel footsteps behind me, even though I'm standing alone in an empty room. Sometimes, when I look in a mirror, I see not only my reflection, but also Eleanor standing silently beside me, her red eyes glowing, as if waiting for something. Long nights, I hear footsteps in the hallway, soft breathing and giggles from behind. There is no one but me, but I know she is still there, watching my every move. I can feel her breath, cold and stuck in the air. One evening, as I sat in the living room, I saw Eleanor's shadow flash in the corner of my eye. I turned around, but there was only emptiness. I smiled faintly, scolded myself for thinking I could escape her. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was a strange, unknown number. I didn't want to hear it, but my hands couldn't resist. I picked up the phone. "You can't escape. She won't forgive you." The cold voice came through the speakerphone, like an inevitable warning. My heart pounded. I quickly hung up and threw the phone on the table. But at that moment, I realized something strange. The picture on the wall started to shake. Light footsteps sounded from behind me. Turning around, I saw Eleanor standing right behind the sofa, her eyes red, filled with anger and pain. I couldn't say a word. I couldn't move, just standing there looking at her. A sudden cold wind swept through, blowing out the only light in the room. I sat there in the dark, unable to see anything but Eleanor's red eyes that were slowly taking over my vision. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt oppressed, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I couldn't help but feel that Eleanor was still standing there, silently waiting. I couldn't continue living in this fear, but I also didn't know what to do to escape. The next morning, I decided to see a psychologist who I had heard could help me get rid of these hallucinations and fears. But as I walked into his office, a cold feeling filled the air. My heart pounded in my chest. The psychologist looked at me seriously. "Do you see someone standing behind me?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I looked around the room, but there was no one but me and him. It was then that I realized that I wasn't the only one who felt like someone was watching me. "Don't worry, we'll help you," he continued, but I couldn't shake the strange feeling that he was trying to hide something. As I left the clinic, the feeling of being watched grew stronger than ever. Eleanor's red eyes followed me every step of the way, unable to escape. That night, I dreamed of her again, Eleanor, but this time, I didn't see her standing there like usual. She stepped closer to me, so close that I could feel her cold breath. "You think you can run away?" she whispered, her voice like a knife cutting into my mind. "You will never escape," she said again, her bloodshot eyes glaring at me. I couldn't move, couldn't say anything. I could only stand there, looking at her, as if I were buried in her world, a place I couldn't escape from. Since my meeting with the therapist, I began to feel as if I had no control over my life. Everything became blurry, not just the frequent nightmares, but also the existence of Eleanor in my waking life. She was no longer just a ghost from the past, but now a living entity, always present with me, in every breath, in every movement. Every morning I woke up with a heavy feeling, as if someone had been standing over my bed all night. The coldness of Eleanor's breath lingered in the air. Sometimes I only had to turn around to feel her close by, her glowing red eyes watching me, waiting and giggling silently. I can't run. I can't escape her. One night, as I was trying to sleep, I sensed a change in the room. A sense of tension settled over me, as if everything in the space were coming to life. The shadows began to twist, becoming tangled in a tangle of hatred and terror. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. The footsteps were soft, but clear, as if someone was moving around my bed. I quickly opened my eyes, but there was no one. The bedroom was still silent, but I could feel someone's presence. Just then, a shadow flashed past the window, quick as lightning. I jumped, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't breathe. In that moment, I realized that Eleanor didn't just want to scare me. She wanted to destroy me. She wanted me gone, to become part of her dark world. I got out of bed, my hands shaking as I pulled the door open. Footsteps continued to echo down the hallway, but this time they were getting closer. I turned around but still saw nothing. My vision began to blur, feeling like I was lost in another world where everything was unfamiliar. Every sound around me became distorted, as if they were being distorted by an invisible force. I couldn't tell what was real and what was not. Everything was blurred by Eleanor's presence. Now, not only at night, but also during the day, she is here, right beside me. Her red eyes appear in every corner, in every cold wind, in every sound. My every move is watched, my every step is followed by a shadow. More and more, I felt Eleanor slowly taking over me. Not just physically, but mentally. I wasn't myself anymore. I started hearing strange voices in my head, voices I couldn't recognize, but they sounded familiar. You can't escape. That sentence kept ringing in my head like an indelible curse. One day, I decided to go to the grave where it all began. That town where I first met Eleanor, where all this haunting began. I thought that if I went there, I might find answers. Maybe I would find a way to end this nightmare. The scenery there had not changed much. The old graves lay silently under mist, creating a quiet, gloomy atmosphere. Everything seemed to have been swallowed up by time. As I entered the cemetery, I felt a cold wind blowing. It was so strong that it made me shiver. I couldn't stop, just walking forward like a sleepwalker. It led me to a simple grave in the corner of the cemetery. On the tombstone was the name of a woman who had died many years ago, Eleanor Williams. I didn't know what to do. Every step I took felt like a nightmare I couldn't escape from. Even standing before her grave, I couldn't feel at ease. I began to feel a presence behind me, a terrifying presence, as if Eleanor were standing right there. A dark shadow slid across the ground. A soft sigh was heard. When I turned back, Eleanor's red eyes were looking at me from the darkness. Her lips curled in a pained smile. A low scream rang through the air, and I felt myself being pulled deeper into the nightmare. A cold wind blew through the cemetery, as if the darkness would never leave. I stood there, facing Eleanor's grave, where all my nightmares had begun. I couldn't leave, couldn't turn back. Eleanor was here, in the air and the darkness, and I knew that if I didn't do something now, she would never leave me alone. I didn't understand why, but I knew that I needed to find out about Eleanor. She wasn't just any ghost. She had a strange connection to me, and I needed to deal with it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to survive this nightmare for long. I turned and walked toward the grave. My footsteps echoed in the darkness, but I couldn't leave. I knew that wherever I went, Eleanor would be there in my head, in my heart. She would never leave. In that moment, I remembered everything I had heard about Eleanor from people of this small town. Everyone said that she was an ordinary woman, living in the old house near the forest, where all the nightmares began. But there was one thing that no one dared to say clearly. Eleanor was dead, and not just died in an accident or illness, but died of a dark reason, a strange curse that had haunted her all her life. Many in town believed that Eleanor was cursed by a sorcerer who lived here before Eleanor was born. The story goes that Eleanor committed a terrible crime, an unforgivable sin, and the sorcerer used his power to keep her forever in darkness. But the curse didn't stop at Eleanor. It spread, affecting everyone who came into contact with her, including me. I knew that to end it all, I needed to find the truth, and that truth might lie in her own grave. Something, some object, that might free me from this nightmare. I bent down and placed my hand on the tombstone. The ground felt cold beneath my palm, as if accepting a silent prayer. As I touched the stone, an unusual sensation began to spread from my hand to my entire body. I felt an invisible force, a force that was pushing me into a state I could not control. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet began to shake. There was a cracking sound as if something was rising from the ground. I fell, and before my eyes, a stone door opened from the tomb, revealing a dark, gloomy space below. I couldn't stop, though my body fought the urge to go in. A voice whispered in my ear, as if Eleanor were calling me, inviting me deeper into the darkness. "Fight me," the voice said, cold and alluring. "Face me." I stepped into the underground door, my heart pounding. Every step, every sound from underground seemed to become clearer than ever. Strange sounds, sighs, the rustling of invisible things passed me by. Underground, I found a large room. The walls were covered with strange symbols, dark drawings that I could not understand. Bones, skulls were arranged in a circle, and in the middle was an old stone table, where I felt something existed. A fire burned brightly, though there was no apparent source of light. And there, in the middle of the stone table, was an old book bound in animal skin. On the pages were strange writings, as if written in blood. This book was the key to understanding Eleanor. It must contain a curse, or a secret that I had to uncover if I wanted to end this horror. I carefully opened the book, and as I did so, a feeling of dread spread through my body. Eleanor's curse is not an ordinary curse. It is a connection between the living world and the dead world. A connection where each person affected by it will gradually become a part of the dead world, and eventually be sucked into darkness forever. The more I read, the more clearly I felt Eleanor's presence gradually taking over me. She was not just a spirit, but a part of the shadow that I could not escape. Now I know that there is only one way to end it all. I must destroy the curse, destroy the book, and break the connection between the two worlds. But do I have the strength to do it, or will I become part of Eleanor's curse forever? I stood there, my hands clutching the book, feeling its power like a dark wave crashing into my mind. Eleanor was close. I could feel her presence, a presence that could not be described in words. The ghosts of the past and the curse still clung to me, pulling me deeper into my own darkness. Every curse, every terrifying image in the book seemed to want to suck me in, forcing me to do something that could not be undone. But I couldn't stop. I had gone too far. There was no turning back. Eleanor was no ordinary spirit. She was not just a nightmare, but part of the dead world, a powerful force that I needed to face to save myself. I opened the book again, the old pages making a rustling sound as if to warn me. The strange characters printed on it shimmer with a faint light, as if they were moving. This curse was not simply a ghost story. It was a door that opened to another world, where death never let go, where everyone caught in it became part of the eternal darkness. A voice spoke in my head, this time clearer than ever. "Come with me," Eleanor whispered. "Just one more step, and you will no longer be afraid. Come with me and become part of this world." My body trembled. I couldn't let myself fall into her trap. But then I remembered what I had learned. To end this curse, I had to do the opposite of what Eleanor wanted. I couldn't let her drag me into the darkness. I had to destroy this book, break her connection to the living world. But how could I destroy something that had given her life? A question still lingered in my mind. I turned and looked back at Eleanor's grave. I could see it more clearly now than ever, even through the thick fog. Something was holding me back. I walked forward, taking each step slowly, each step a challenge to myself. Soon I was standing before the tombstone, still clutching the book. I felt a strange power flow through me, and everything around me began to spin. I looked at the name on the tombstone, Eleanor. Nothing unusual, but I knew she was more than a name. She was a force. There was a noise. There was definitely something moving beneath the ground. Eleanor's grave was beginning to crack, as if it could no longer bear my presence. I knew now that there was only one option, to end it all. I began to read the words in the book quickly, as I felt the shaking getting stronger. I didn't understand all the words, but I felt that these sounds, these sentences, were the key to destroying the curse. Each word I spoke made the ground around me shake more violently. A cold wind blew through, and I could hear Eleanor sigh. "You can't do this," she said, her voice growing choked and dark. "You can't destroy me." But I had made my decision. I could no longer live in fear. I could no longer let her shadow haunt me. I let out one last scream and threw the book into Eleanor's grave. There was a loud bang. Red light erupted from the tomb, forcing me to cover my eyes. I couldn't see clearly at the moment, but I felt a change in the atmosphere. A strange power was released in the tomb, and I felt my body being lifted off the ground. When I opened my eyes, all was quiet. The book was gone, and the ground beneath my feet had returned to normal. Eleanor's grave stopped shaking, and the air around me had become still. I no longer felt her presence. Eleanor is no longer there. The curse has been broken. I stood up, feeling as if I had just escaped from an indescribable nightmare. But in the dark corner of my mind, I still felt a vague anxiety. Was she really gone, or was it just temporary? As I left the cemetery, a strange feeling came over me. It had been so long since I felt free. But I knew that what I had been through would haunt me forever. Eleanor was no ordinary spirit. She was part of this world and part of death. And even though I had broken the curse, I did not know if she would ever return. But one thing I am sure of is that I fought and won my life back.